In his book Sex World, Ron Koertge shreds the last barriers of bad taste in the world of pornographic literature. Now that I've got your attention, Ron has been writing poetry and fiction, particularly youth fiction, for a long time. Personal friends with Algernon Swinburne and Percy Shelley, Ron has written somewhere between, 60 and 100 books. Billy Collins cited Ron as one of the few poets who understands how humor works in poetry. And Ron does strike a perfect balance between irreverence and compassion in all of his writing. I won't cite the many awards and accolades Ron has garnered over the years, or list the titles of his books, because time is limited and Ron is not charging us for the evening. One true thing I want to highlight about Ron Koertge is his generosity. I once wrote him a fan letter. He wrote me back on paper. If you don't believe me, just check eBay. And now, Ron Koertge.
I'm going to start with this poem called Books on Tape. I don't like books on tape. I know why people do. I'm perfectly fine with those of you who love them. And I don't want to drive and listen to a book. I don't want to sit by myself and listen to a book. And this poem explains why. In the poem, there's a lot of information about punctuation, but some of which I knew, most of which I had to look up. But you'll get it in the third stanza. Books on tape. I don't want to listen to a story while I cook. I don't want to be distracted while I sort laundry into cold and hot. I love the aroma of the page. I love the paragraph with its ghostly pilcrow. I love the sentence, often sinuous and dressed in Playfair font. I even love the decisive period, the disputable Oxford comma. I especially love the exclamation point that was once called the note of admiration. I don't want some actor's voice hurrying me along. I want to read slow as butter melting, or maybe turn the pages so fast I feel an agreeable breeze. That's me there on the porch. Iced tea, blue couch, cat at my feet, book in my lap, right where it belongs.
I'll make a supportive comment, Ron. At one point, I received an email from the chair of our department, and it said this, and I'm so grateful you mentioned this bit of punctuation. The email read, "You use too many exclamation marks." My response was, "Yes, and you use too many periods." So I'm grateful that you're supportive of liking that piece of punctuation.
Thanks, Jack. I am supportive. I just can't do them. I can't do books on tape. Thinking of that though, let me show you something else. It's probably as we speak, this is being ironically read by a bunch of actors. This is not a book of poems. This book is called A Day at the Beach. It's a middle grade novel. A friend of mine and I, Gary Schmidt, he and I taught together in a MFA program for people who want to write what's called children's literature, and that includes picture books, middle grade fiction, YA, and beyond that. This will be out in a month, and it's got 25 kids, a sketch for every child. Reminds me to tie our chat today together. They're not like flash fiction, but they are little stories, individual boys and girls all of whom are on one beach, one day for 12 hours. So I like it a lot. And there's a lot more money in kid lit than in poetry, alas. And I like money. I like to get it. I like to spend it. Do you know that I like to bet on horses? Yeah, I love the handicap. I've been following these 3-year-olds coming to the Kentucky Derby for over a year now. I knew them when they were 2, and they were just being broken to turn them into thoroughbred racehorses. So I'll have a winner for you in the Derby if you want to get in touch with me. Or I'll have a contender for you. The next poem is called Self-Reliance. It's, the Emerson essay? Lovely essay, by the way. But it connects at the end of this poem to the young woman who is the central character. I like to read poems like this because they go back to my agrarian background. I worked on farms as a teenager. My parents were poor. I've worked all my life. I had a Social Security card when I was 14. I worked in my dad's ice cream store. I mean, it wasn't, child abuse. I liked it. But I've used that same Social Security card all the way until I retired from teaching. And I had so many quarters that I could get I get a check every month, which my wife doesn't. She was also a teacher. But in California, you're a member of the state teachers retirement something fund or something. So we get a check every month from that. But I get 2 checks. Aha. So this poem is called Self-Reliance. The main character is a young woman. It's what in Hollywood is called a 2-shot, 2 characters. My wife and me. There's a line in here about Ralph Waldo Emerson, a fact which is true. And then it gets a little more farm-like. I probably can't drive a tractor now, but I used to be able to drive a tractor. Not a skill called for in Los Angeles. Self-reliance. My wife puts down her book and says, "Can you believe that Ralph Waldo Emerson didn't make love to his wife so he could pour every ounce of passion right into his work?" And I tell her, so every high school football coach in the world tells his boys to forget about pretty cheerleaders and save it for the game. She looks out a window and stirs her decaf. And she says, when I was 16, my boyfriend Brooks drove us out to the North Pasture almost every day after school. And the last time I got out of the bed of the pickup, folded his mama's quilt, and walked a bit. Brooks and his dad raised cattle for beef. And when these dairy heifers saw me, they wandered up. I scratched their foreheads and they leaned in. They were big and warm and didn't know that a stockyard truck was coming. I was right next to the steel stock tank. I could see the moon on the water, me in my underwear, with cows all around me. But that poem ends well. I don't have a problem talking about poems that seem to work because I don't always feel in charge of my poems. I put in the time, but I believe seriously in being available to the poems and being a middleman. So in religion, it would be a paraclete, like the Holy Ghost, but I am not the Holy Ghost. But I could be in the middle between the poem that wants to be written and the poem needs someone to write the poem, someone to be finite. So sometimes I'm that person. So this poem is a Q&A poem. The Q is the title, and I bet you can guess what the A is. The A is the whole poem. The question is, if you had to choose, which would it be, poetry or prose? And here's the answer, or my answer. Poetry will make out in a Toyota Corolla, while prose complains about the AM radio and doesn't even try to slide the seat back and get comfortable. Prose will go on about the reproductive process, but poetry will kiss you smack on the mouth and make your head spin. Prose will tell a long story about somebody drowning. Poetry will pull that person to safety and light a fire. Prose is a fat man in a Speedo taking a selfie. Poetry is a cat that prowls around with a live bird in its mouth. And that bird is still singing. Trying to read the room here. You're the room. Yeah. So I'm jumping around. Let's try. We're all old enough to know the song "The Man I Love." But I had my wits about me. You know the song? Someday he'll come along, the man I love. Yeah. Anyway, it's in the poem, but you should know it. If you don't know it, you should play it. It's just the best. Whoops. Wait, I lost you. There we are. The setting is me in my car, at a stop sign. My students say things like this: "Well, this really happened." And I always say, it doesn't make it a poem, and that's autobiography. But it did really happen in the sense of I'm in a car and I hear the song. So that much is autobiographical. Someday. From the Audi beside me at the red light comes Ella Fitzgerald's "The Man I Love," one of the great Torch songs. The lyrics are quaint. He'll be big and strong. He'll build a little home just meant for two. And someday he'll come along. The song was part of an early musical called Lady Be Good, but it was cut. Added to a different show, it was cut again. So in a way, that brush off is perfect for my theme of unrequited love. Tears and yearning and regret. Him or her with somebody else. And who hasn't imagined burning that bed with its tangled sheets? Who hasn't sat staring into a glass of bourbon, a smoldering torch, the only light in the room? That's one of the only things I regret about being older. I can't be as foolish in love as I used to be. And I just kind of love being foolish. Well, here's the poem that David quoted when we started. He quoted the last few lines. This poem only has 8 lines. It's called First Grade. This poem is on so, not on, in so many anthologies. And I used to get letters from kids. Sometimes the teachers would make them write letters. So they would just be, dear Mr. K, my teacher is making me write to you. So I have to ask, where do you get your inspiration? And I would always answer them. And I wouldn't be a smartass about it. I would always answer them. And I wrote them postcards. And then email came in, they don't write so much anymore. It isn't kind of like, kind of isn't the same thing. Anyway, here's the whole poem. But you'll see why it's anthologized a lot, called First Grade. 8 lines. Until then, every forest had wolves in it. And we thought it would be fun to wear snowshoes all the time. And we could all talk to water. So, who is this woman with the gray breath, calling out names and pointing to the little desks we will occupy for the rest of our lives? Found true, isn't it? I taught at a community college, and one of the teachers there had her students make up their own little like name tags and stand them up right on their desks until they rebelled. One of them, I think, went to the department head and said, for Christ's sake, this isn't grade school. Why can't you remember our names? And so she had to quit doing that. Power to the students. Well, I can read you the Nancy Drew poem, because probably we all know who Nancy Drew and all know who Nancy Drew is. I wrote a sestina about the Hardy Boys. Boy, if you want to try a bitch of a form, try a sestina. It is really, really hard. But when they're good, they're really good. There aren't that many of them around. I think I spent a month writing sestinas. I don't know, maybe 2 of them were okay. None of them were marquee poems, but they were fun. Anyway, Nancy Drew isn't a sestina. Nancy Drew, here you go. It's a prose poem, David. Here's the poem, or the prose poem, Nancy Drew. I can't go to the drugstore without stumbling over a mystery. There I am in aisle 11 when an owl with a message lands by the Listerine. And the next thing I know, I'm in a secret passage. Kudos from my friends Bess and George, who watched me solve the case of the born-again badger. One more key to the city, one more pat on the back. I have a boyfriend, Ned Nickerson, but no time to fall in love, given all the mossy mansions, scarlet slippers, haunted windmills, and forgotten cities clamoring for my attention. I don't mind being busy, but no one knows how lonely I am, how long the nights, a moon's white light revealing yet another body by the gazebo. I haven't read some of these poems in a long time. These are pretty good.
It's not bad.
Yeah, no, it's not
I'm going to
bad.
steal that idea, but I want to write about Jessica Fletcher instead.
Yeah. There's plenty of ways people and things to write about. It's 20 to 5. Let me do 10 more minutes. David, that sound about right?
Anything you like.
Okay, how about 10 more minutes? And then you guys are going to read, right? You have an open reading?
Yeah, we're going to do some reading.
Okay, because I want to hear. Let me read you the poems, some poems from the new book. I have what's known as a distinctive voice, but you know, I like to run counter to that sometimes. These, once I find them, will probably sound like me. So, there you go. Yeah. Oh, I want to read you the piece from Sex World that was made into a short animated film in 2018 and was up for an Oscar. So my wife and I just went to see, we saw the short animated a week ago, and we saw the live shorts, yesterday. And we didn't go to the Oscar. The writer never gets to go anywhere. There's a joke about the actress who came from Europe and was so naive she slept with the writer, because you never get anywhere sleeping with the writer. You always want a producer, or something. Poor writers, we get nothing. But it was really fun. The people who made it were young, a couple named Max and Rue. I'll read it to you in a minute. They did a really, really nice job. And I'll tell you where you can see it. And so, I'll read two more poems and then I'll end with that. Oh, I'll read Girl Scouts from Space. This didn't happen, but a niece told me this story. One of my nieces is a Girl Scout. So obviously I have more cookies than I can eat. So that's going on now, for God's sake. But she was telling that my wife has a huge family. So when you go to a party, there's, like 40 people. So you go and you talk to everybody. And I was talking to my niece, one of them. She told me this story about she and her, in her little troop or whatever they're called, went to a senior center, and one of her girlfriends, I used the girl's name in the poem, Shui Ming, who was Chinese American, was scorned by one of the older guys, some old guy who was prejudiced. And it hurt her feelings, hurt everybody's feelings. So, you guys aren't curious, or you're shy or something about where poems come from. And I started to brood about this. And I brooded about it to the point that I knew I could get a poem out of this, which is the predatory nature of poets anyway. Don't tell me anything, because I'll take it and I'll use it. So I'm waiting for this poem to kind of present itself to me. And eventually it did. Well, here it is, Girl Scouts from Space. Willow and Shui Ming ride their bikes into the desert to earn environmental stewardship badges. They've barely settled in when a saucer lands, and the girls feel dizzy and hold on to each other. A door in the craft opens, and the aliens descend. They're thin, with heads like volleyballs, and their voices are reedy. We know, Willow, how weekends with your father and his new girlfriend are excruciating. And Shui Ming, even though you sang beautifully at the assisted living center, someone told you to go back to China. Your sighs reached us as we passed Venus. As scouts ourselves, we know something about the dark machinery that ruins your world. we applaud your interest in coding and horseback riding, but you have also earned the Heartbreak Badge. Congratulations. When you wake up, it will be pinned to your colorful sashes. Poem always moves me a little, or a lot. You wait for those poems, you know they're going to come, you know that they're there, and you're just patient. So one last poem, and then a very short piece of flash fiction, the one that was made into the Oscar-nominated animated short. Jesus, it was like 7 or 8 years ago. Talk about time's winged chariot. So here's the title poem from the new book, which the title of the new book is Pandora's Kitchen. And I think Lisa and I talked about showing the title. We did, right? And I couldn't do it because I don't have a color printer. I couldn't hold it up, but it was a good idea anyway. So here's the poem, Pandora's Kitchen. You know who she is. Everybody knows that story. And there's one main character. I'm narrating it. And here it is, Pandora's Kitchen. It's late. She can't sleep. She's in pajamas and her hair is a mess. She stares at her refrigerator. Inside is yogurt and a head of iceberg lettuce, mustard and mayonnaise, not envy and lust, and the other hardships that flew out of the box that Zeus gave her as a wedding present, the box that Ovid called an odious treasure. It was her destiny to open it, a mistake she had to make. But that doesn't help much in the middle of the night. Hungry, lonely, remorseful, but still beautiful, even in the light from the small bulb in the back by the low-fat cottage cheese she buys every week. Ah, Pandora. I wrote a whole book about gods and goddesses called Olympusville, which I thought was a hell of a title. Because there's a lot of I read a whole lot about the gods and goddesses. They're just like humans. They're mean, they're horny, they're bellicose. I mean, they're just like you and me. And that's why they're so attractive to some people who don't like, the regular God. So I'll tell you where to see that. You can see this Oscar-nominated film. It's on oh God, what is it? YouTube. It's called Negative Space. All you got to do is Google it. Don't do it now. Give me 5 more minutes, and it'll come up. Rue and Max.
There's a link on our page, Ron.
You got it? Oh, great. Fine.
Yeah.
It is
so you just,
so well
instead
done.
of Crazy Wisdom, there's a link right there.
There you go. And the only reason we lost was because we're up against 4 other short animated films. One of them was Kobe Bryant's called Dear Basketball. He had the Norman Williams, the composer, do the music. I mean, we were toast from the jump. We were never going to beat that guy. Every white guy in Beverly Hills just checked the box, for Kobe. But it was a great run. Bianca and I went into someplace on Wilshire. We got to see him all the shorts at one time. I signed a bunch of stuff and was, had my 15 minutes. It was just so lovely. They were great kids. Negative Space. It's this long. Do I have it up? Where is it? I can't see it. There you go. My dad taught me to pack. how to lay out everything, put back half, roll stuff that rolls, wrinkle-prone things on top of cotton things, then pants, waist to hem, nooks and crannies for socks, belts around the sides like snakes, plastic over that, and the shoes, wear heavy stuff on the plane. We started when I was little. I'd roll up his socks, and then he'd pretend to put me into the suitcase and we'd laugh. Some guys bond with their dads shooting hoops or talking about Chevrolets. We did it over luggage. And by the time I was 12, if he was busy, I'd pack for him. Mom tried, but just didn't have the knack. He'd get somewhere, open his suitcase, and text me one word: perfect. And that from him meant a lot. His funeral was terrible. Him laid out in that big carton, and me crying and thinking, look at all that wasted space.